This is Rebecca Schissel Marshall with Whole Body Upgrade, a podcast to help you get unstuck, feel better, and have more energy. Let's get started. Welcome back to Whole Body Upgrade. It's episode 76, Why It's Hard to Say No and Rest and How to Start. And I'd like to begin by welcoming in the direction. So I welcome in the great direction of the east, the direction of the south and the west and the north. And I welcome all the helping and compassionate spirits that are here to guide us, as well as those that have lived in this world, our ancestors who have lived well and died well so that they can be here to support us. And I ask that the directions support us and that whatever needs to be said, whatever needs to be heard, and that all of the elements are surrounding us today in the way that they always do, in loving kindness. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Creek and the Cherokee in what is now known as Athens, Georgia. So today, I want to talk a little bit about saying no. I mentioned this in the last podcast, in the last episode. And this is something that comes up a lot. It comes up a lot in popular conversation with my clients, with my friends and family. And in fact, I was invited to talk about this at a symposium at the university about saying no and the importance of rest. And I wanted to share some of my thoughts with you about this. To begin, I'm going to mainly be talking about why it is so hard to say no, because I think the importance of understanding where we come from, these underlying assumptions that come along with saying no, that becomes really helpful in beginning to say no. So I'm going to be talking about saying no, but I also want to talk about this underlying assumption that goes with if you're saying no, the idea behind it is you're going to actually have time to rest, right? That's the hope. That's why we say no. We don't say no just to be mean and horrible and spiteful, right? We're saying no to be able to gain something else, either something else we want to do or self-care time, or being able to actually not be breaking down physically, mentally, emotionally. So I see it a lot in the world around me, right? I see this, and you've probably seen it too. I've seen a lot in my own life. We're told now it's kind of like as a culture we know that we should be saying no, that we need to say no more often, that it's okay to say no, that no is a complete sentence, right? I hear that one a lot. Some of us have learned this. Some of us know it. Some of us haven't even heard those messages yet, but some of us have learned it. And some of us simply don't believe it yet. Right? I remember thinking like, yeah, right. Like, say no. What the heck is that? Right? You've got to be kidding me. And I remember thinking like, you don't understand what is going on in my life. How can I say no? It felt like it was impossible. So just a little side note, there are times when this is actually true, right? Our society is not an equal and just society, and there are times there are people who really can't say no, right? They really don't have that choice. And a simple example is, right, like our children, this is a privileged example, right? I have children. They need to be fed. They need to eat, and I choose to feed them, right? And there are parents who may not be able to do that, right? That's not them saying no. I get to kind of make that choice. That's a privileged choice, right? I have food, I have money, I can feed my children. And I'm not saying no to them, right? So a single mother or yes, any single person, any single parent with children may have less no's that they can say. So just recognize that there are marginalized populations, there are individuals that may not have as much bandwidth for being able to say no. So let's assume that you have the opportunity to say no to some things in your life. Maybe you've heard that you need to say no. Maybe you're overwhelmed and exhausted and burned out, but you still don't say no to things. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit, right? Like, why is it so hard to say no? And knowing this may help you understand where it's coming from. That may actually help you to say no. So it turns out there are a lot of reasons why it's hard to say no. I used to think that this was kind of an internal problem, that this was a problem with me, that I just had something, there was something wrong with me because I couldn't say no. And in reality, this couldn't be further from the truth. It's not about something being wrong with you or some sort of internal flaw. So I first want to kind of zoom out with this vision. I'd like to talk first about this bigger picture of how society views the roles of individuals who are socialized as women, right? We're going to use that particular viewpoint. I tend to talk mostly about women, and my clients are mostly women. So the patriarchal view is that women are in a supporting role in our society, right? We are not always, and this is not, we're making broad sweeping generalizations, but often that women are viewed as the supporters. We're supposed to help keep everything running smoothly. Behind every good man is a good woman, right? That women are supposed to take care of the kids, be the woman behind the man, that we're supposed to make the team run, we help get things done. And it's designed in that way. It's designed in that way, right? To see women as supporters instead of leaders on purpose. When women are in a supporting role, they tend to be kept small or smaller, right? We don't always get to step into our own personal or individual genius because we're supporting someone else. Now, does that mean it's bad or wrong? No, not necessarily. I'm just saying, just notice how that's the role that most women are taught or thought of, or, this conception of what we are supposed to do. We're too busy supporting someone else and their genius to think of things differently, to create new paradigms, to come from that divine feminine viewpoint, right? So the patriarchy vision is of women as supporters, which is a very limiting societal perspective, right? It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just that we're kind of cast in that only one small role. And if we're supporters, then as supporters, we are supposed to say yes, right? How can we say no if we're supporting other people? Society also tells us that we're supposed to be productive members of society. It's all about production, right? Thanks to the industrial revolution, right? We should all be really productive. All people, not just women, men and women. In fact, if you are productive, and the more productive you are, the more valuable you are to society, the more worthy you are. So we've linked this perspective of productivity and worthiness in our society. And we've linked this productivity to that it's the only way to be worthy, not just like one way. It's that if you are not productive, then you are not worthy, right? This message is so ingrained that when we approach people we know, if you think about this, this is how it goes, the conversation at the university. Hey, how are you? I live in the South, so it's hey, 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 how are you? The typical response is busy. That in itself is so telling that we are conditioned to even respond that way. We internalize this so much that if we try to stop and rest, we ourselves start to believe that, but I'm not a productive member of society. I must not be worthy. Who will I be if I am not, right? It's kind of like the whole basis of ableism too, of like, well, if they're not a productive, right? And there's I'm going to put quotes around that for those of you listening to the podcast, right? That there's something about productivity that not only is aligned with who we are as people and that worth, and that we have to be that certain way, that if we're not productive, that it means something bad or wrong has happened, right? This perspective also influences communities as well as individuals. So we have this bigger societal view. As young women, as girls even, there is a lot of emphasis placed on taking care of others, right? Taking care of, why don't you help? Why don't you be a helper in the classroom, right? We see other women as supposedly nurturing, right? And we're in those traditional roles. We've had fewer role models of anything beyond teacher, nurse, right? Those traditional nurturing roles that was only seen as those were the okay things for women to do. We have fewer role models in the male-dominated fields like science, technology, right? Fewer women in leadership positions. Just watching the whole presidential race when there was a woman running to be president in 2016 was very much like, oh, this is how we view women, became very prominent in the media. We see families operating in a certain way. Like as we grow up, we see that the mother does all the cooking or does all the cleaning, and that what happens at the end of the day, maybe the man goes to the couch and relaxes from a hard day, while the woman, who's also just come home from a job, is doing more of the childcare responsibilities or doing more of the cooking and the cleaning, right? We also see that, for instance, in my household, it was similar. My mother was a stay-at-home mother for a while, and my father was in academia, and I saw that as he wanted to move up in the world, we moved. Whether the rest of us wanted to or not to, whether my mother wanted to or not, that was not the discussion, right? So we implicitly and explicitly learn these lessons that if we aren't taking care of others, then we're doing something wrong, right? The message is very clearly passed down that if we put our needs or wants first, we are being selfish, we are being uncaring, and we should really review our priorities. Like, don't you want the company to go first? Don't you want this university to succeed? Right? This can be seen at place whether you're choosing to have dinner, whether you're in a romantic relationship, with your friendships, or even in the relationship with yourself, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that. So if you say no to something, then a lot of internal dialogue and external dialogue is that you are selfish, that you are not productive, right? You're not worthy then, and you're not doing your job as a supporter. Ugh, so much stuff there, right? That's why it's so hard. It's so hard to say no because of that. On top of that, women are also socialized to be perfectionists. Yep. So there's perfectionism again. Most women have been given the societal message and the individual message that we need to look, act, be a certain way. And if we don't measure up to that image, well, again, then there's something wrong with us. that we aren't, there must be, why can't you actually have that perfect makeup that you see on Instagram, or the perfect house, or the Better Homes and Gardens magazine spread on your living room, right? It's emphasized in social media. It's emphasized in commercials, on television. It's basically everywhere we look in America, right? There is a certain caliber that we're supposed to measure up to, even if it's a photoshopped image in a magazine, even if it's not possible for us, right? It's not physically possible, and yet that's what we're told we're supposed to look like. In addition to that, right, there's more. It's just like that Ginsu knife commercial, but wait, there's more. We simply aren't taught to say no, right? We don't have the model for it because our mothers weren't taught to say no. Or our fathers, even they weren't taught to say no. There is this societal pressure to do and be and support people. So there isn't a conversation as young children or adolescents of how to balance our lives, how to say no to things. We need to make sure that our resumes for our college application is right. So we need to do all of these things, even if it means you're burned out at the age of 18, right? You're not taught to say no because no one else is taught the skill. Very few people have this skill. And that means, right, we're all learning, or hopefully some of us are learning this new skill. And as a society, really, we need to learn how to do this skill. This is why so many workplaces are so toxic, is because we're all just believing these same things. So we have all of this societal input. We have the familial input, right, from our families. And that creates, ta-da, the critical voice in your head, right? This very unkind voice that we all have. We've all been conditioned by society, by our families, to beat ourselves up for all of these things, right? For not being perfect, for not being able to meet everyone's needs. So if you've ever noticed that voice, this little voice, I use this little, if you're watching the video, it's this little, it just feels like it's this quiet little thing sitting in your head. Well, it's not very quiet sometimes, but this voice in your head provides all of these messages for us, right? We internalize it. It's typically very harsh, unkind, and it will often say things or often wonder, what is wrong with you? Like, why can't you be so perfect? Or even, you are so stupid. Why can't you be like that? Why can't you be like Sally Sue next door? Right? Why can't you be like that Instagram filter? Why don't you look perfect? Why can't you be like your person who works full-time and volunteers at the homeless shelter and is the perfect mom and has gorgeous flowers in your yard, right? We keep comparing ourselves to that, and that critical voice is always there to point out when it's such a big problem. So that critical voice keeps in place all the other lessons that we've been taught by our families, by society, by patriarchy. And I've read that it's at about 7 or 8 years old that we become internalized, that those messages become conditioned so that we have a much harder time saying no. We simply say yes to everything, even if we are doubled over in pain and we've only had 4 hours of sleep the night before. Even if we feel numb on the inside, right? We start resolutions, not even at the beginning of the year. We're like, this is the month. This is the month I'm going to actually start doing self-care. I'm going to start working out. And then we wonder why we keep saying yes to the things that don't light us up, why we keep saying yes to everything, everyone, but ourselves. Okay. So it's so hard because we've been programmed to continue to say yes and not to say no. So that's the bad news. The good news is we can learn this new skill. We can start to do something about it. We can start to say no. One of the first things I want to offer about how to say no, and this, I'm going to kind of touch on it, but it's a bigger thing than this. The first thing is to start to change the relationship you have with yourself. At the beginning, when you're learning how to do this, it can mean actually changing that conversation in your head to being more about kindness, to be and say kind things to yourself. This is the beginning of self-compassion. Self-compassion is an amazing tool that builds the relationship you have with you so that you can start to trust yourself and be there for yourself. When I started realizing that I was the one, in a good way, responsible for taking care of myself, and that I really wanted to take care of this person so that this person didn't suffer, it became a lot easier to say no, that I was the one who could help take care of me. And I'll say that I have really become an expert in saying no. I'm not perfect, but I am really good at saying no now. Part of this is because I've built this relationship with myself, and I've built this relationship to myself by listening to the part of me who is suffering. And by suffering, I mean there's a part of me who's like, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted. Or I just can't do one more thing. I actually listen to that part, right? And, the part of me that's in pain, that might be an easier way to understand than suffering. So the part of this listening, right, is not only listening to that younger parts that's suffering, but also in building a relationship, I'm listening to my body, right? My encouragement around this is don't wait until you are sick. I did not do that. I was very sick. I was very sick from a young age, really. My body started giving me messages when I was in elementary school that I didn't listen to. But again, in college, when things really started breaking down in graduate school, things kept kind of escalating. So don't wait till you're feeling sick. Don't wait till you have aches and pains. That is your body asking, or depending on where you are, maybe begging for help, begging to be listened to. So begin to start listening to your body. When your body is tired, take 1 minute, just 1 minute. Close your eyes. Notice how you feel. Just feel what it feels like, the physical sensations of breathing. How does it feel in your body? Can you feel your body? It could be even before you notice you're tired. Can you feel your body? If you couldn't see your toes, how would you know they were there? You can listen to those sensations, like, where do I feel this in my body? Is there tightness? Is there lightness? Is there heaviness? Listening is really the first step to saying no, because as you listen, whether you listen to that younger part of you who's really suffering, or listening to your body that might be in pain or might be tired or exhausted, you will start to know when you are off track. Like, oh yeah, I better say no to that. That does not feel good in my body. Compassion for all parts of you, right? The physical part, the emotional, the mental, the energetic, the spiritual, all those parts of you, they're always trying to communicate with you. And it makes it a lot easier to say no against all those societal pressures when we're really listening to ourselves and we've built that relationship with ourselves. You can also begin setting up time for something you want to say yes to. So there are many things that we might want to do in our lives, but the reality is that when we say no to something that is meh, not so much, we make space for ourselves. We make space for something we really do want to say yes to, like maybe sleeping 30 more minutes a day, right? It could be that you even just want to walk in the sunlight for 5 minutes every day. Physically, literally, put this on your calendar. When will you do it? Where will you do this? Right? What are you committing to? I have a digital calendar. I put it on my digital calendar. I'm going to the woods to run, and I'm going to do it on these mornings. So when somebody says, can you? I say, no. Maybe another day, right? It might be a maybe another, but I'm so sorry I'm booked at that time, right? If there is another yes that you have on your calendar that you want to do, then you may rearrange, right? When you may find like, okay, I can only make that appointment at that time, so I'll go to the woods in the afternoon instead of the morning, right? That's okay too. But it might still be a yes and, right? A no and a yes. So start practicing saying no, even in these little teeny tiny steps. This is how we begin. It's a skill. It's a muscle we're building. No, I can't hop on that call at 5:30. I can tomorrow, right? I can do it tomorrow morning. Even that might feel really big, right? It might be saying no to a restaurant that doesn't sound good to you when you're deciding where you're going to go out to eat with your friends. It might be saying no to the idea from society that we're supposed to wear a certain type of clothing. You might be saying no to other societal norms. You can say no to helping Bob from accounting today. Practice saying no in little ways and notice how you feel when you say no, and notice that you didn't die and neither did Bob. As you start practicing saying no, you'll notice that emotions arise, right? You'll notice that things will come up. And it can be really helpful to notice what it is that shows up. And this is something I heard recently that I love this differentiation. Someone said, if you have the choice, if you're noticing your emotions, if you have the choice between feeling guilty and feeling resentful, always choose guilty. Always choose guilty. Guilty is just that conditioned belief that we should be everything to everyone. So when you're feeling guilty, you can notice like, well, what is it that is showing up with the guilty, right? Is it patriarchy? Is that what's coming up? It doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right? But if I say, okay, fine, I'll do the dishes one more time tonight, and then I am resentful of my partner, my husband, for not doing the dishes, like, I would rather feel guilty for asking him to do it, right? And there might need to be some consideration about, well, really, okay, I haven't done the dishes in a week and you have been doing the dishes. Okay, I'm willing to do that, right? But that conversation, even in of itself, is not just assuming that you're going to be the one to do the dishes, that you're going to be the one to help Bob in accounting. Maybe you can say like, well, let's ask Joe. Maybe Joe can help you, Bob, right? So all of that means that you listening to guilt versus resentment, always choose guilt. Guilt is going to be way less toxic to your body than resentment. As previously mentioned, right? I talk about my body. I use my body as that tool to follow. When I listen to my body, what my body says about saying yes and saying no, then I know more. I have a gauge for when I need to say no and when I need to rest, right? My body is always going to tell me, if I check in and I listen, when I need to rest. I will also know then, if I'm listening to my body, what absolutely lights me up, when I want to do a thing, right? When it's a yes, I want to do that. When I need to say yes to something. Usually for me, if I'm going back and forth, like, well, I guess I should, right? Should is another way to listen for that no that should be going on. Then it's usually a no for me if I'm going back and forth. One last note about saying no. Sometimes I find that I actually do say no only to turn around and see that I've added something else or said yes to something else because the drive is so strong to be productive. And sometimes I will avoid rest because it can feel uncomfortable because I'm not used to it. And I think, well, if I said no to one thing, but I say yes to another thing, that's better, right? Which it is in some ways. But ultimately, if I'm not resting, if I'm not taking the time and making the space for what I want to do, then I'm not taking care of myself, right? So it's not about the number of no's. It's more about that white space on your calendar, right? It can be so hard to rest because that productivity drive is so hardwired in our culture, and it's a constant bombardment of that belief. So to rest, we have to say no, and we have to say no to get white space on our calendar. Okay, dear ones, I hope you keep practicing to say no, and I hope this helps you take care of yourself and recover from burnout, or maybe even prevent burnout. If you need help in saying no or resting, I would love to invite you to my Vibrant Health Chat. In this call, we can look at what patterns are preventing you from saying no and to help you create more white space and to take care of yourself on a bigger level, on a vibrant health level. It's a free call. I offer it to anyone who is interested in the possibility of learning about working with me. We'll just hop on a Zoom or a phone call, and I'll get some ideas for you so that we can see what could be possible. Okay, dear ones, take good care of yourself. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Whole Body Upgrade. If you'd like to learn more about working with me, you can visit me on Facebook or Instagram or on my website, CenteredYou, that's CenteredYou.com. See you on the next episode of Whole Body Upgrade.